What if your biggest problem in your sales conversations or any conversation isn't what you're saying? It's what you're not asking. Here's what I've seen come across thousands of business conversations and what the research backs up. Most business professionals have the talking down. That's the easy part. But asking questions, any questions, let alone good questions, is too often, sold separately. My guest today wrote the book on this, like literally. In fact, he wrote his doctorate dissertation on the very subject. And it's one of the best books on asking questions that I've ever found and read. Are you ready to question everything? Welcome to the Elite Business Connector podcast, where we believe how you interact with people will make or break your opportunity to develop a real and influential connection. Now, whether you're a rookie or a rock star with people, you're in the right place right now. Let's do this. Welcome to the Elite Business Connector podcast. I'm your host, Brian Buckley, husband of one, father of five, and on a mission to help you develop, deepen, and master your business communication skills. And my promise to you is if you listen and subscribe, I'll bring my best content and energy every week to help you get better at communicating and connecting in a business environment. Now, if you're in sales, you're in leadership, service, or hospitality, then you are in the right place right now. Let me introduce you to our subject matter expert today. Dr. J.R. Briggs is the founder of Kairos Partnerships, a DM graduate, coach, speaker, and author who has spent his career studying what happens when human beings actually ask better questions. Love that. His new book is called The Art of Asking Better Questions, Pursuing Stronger Relationships, Healthier Leadership, and Deeper Faith. This episode will challenge, it's going to motivate you, and it's going to inspire you in a number of ways. So let's get after it. Please welcome Dr. J.R. Briggs to the Elite Business Connector podcast. Well, I'm here with J.R. Briggs and looking forward to having this conversation. But first and foremost, J.R., where are you and how are you?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on here, Brian. I'm in the greater Philadelphia area, and I'm doing well. I love summer. It's a good chance with family, a little different gear. I travel a lot in the fall and in the spring, and so I try to bring it down a gear or two here in the summer. So I'm enjoying a little bit of a lower gear here. Well,
and you're a great sports town, just like Chicago. So you're have some great teams going on right now, which I'm a little bit #very jealous.
Yes, we're big Phillies fans. We're big Eagles fans. So yeah, it is a passionate place to watch your sports. And when they're doing well, it's really fun. And when they're not, it's not real fun.
Well, quick story on your Sixers. The first time I had heard about how they handle heckling visitors for the starting lineup, and I was told what was going to happen. And for the listener, they'll say the name. So it'll be like from University of North Carolina, number 17, J.R. Briggs. And as soon as they finish the S, 18,000 fans at the top of their lungs finished with "sucks."
Yeah,
for all five of us.
Very Philly.
I know, right? I mean, I knew it was coming, JR, and I jumped out of my seat because it was so loud, so inappropriate, so funny, so Philly on there.
Yeah, it's very Philly, very Philly.
So before we jump right in, I want to give you kudos. You are one of only a handful of people I can actually say this to. I bought your book for the first time on Kindle so I could read it on a plane. Then I ended up getting it on Audible so I could re-listen to it for the interview. And then I have the physical copy as well right here as a visual aid, but I've gone back to it a handful of times as a quick reference on that. So mad kudos, you did the buy three, you're paid for three, get three from this guy.
Well, my publisher thanks you. So
hopefully someday that you see the benefits of that. So, well, let's dive right in, JR. I mean, obviously, I found you The Art of Asking Better Questions. I've read so many books on questions, and this is kind of at the top of the list here. What created the origin of writing a book about asking better questions?
Yeah, it's a question I get often, and it's a fun answer I love to give. I grew up in a fantastic family, really grateful. My parents really modeled question asking well, especially my father, and that's who I dedicated the book to. Yep. Even at a young age, around the dinner table we would just have great conversations that were prompted by great questions at dinner. I would hear my dad talk to adults when I was younger and just kind of overhear. And he was a business guy, worked for General Electric, and I just appreciated the way he would ask neighbors or sports parents on the sidelines of Little League fields or at church, or I would just overhear him. And I thought, man, there's some great conversation happening that's being prompted by questions. So that's the first one. The second factor was I happened to be noticing the people who are really inspiring. And then I noticed the people that live small lives, very uninspiring lives. And I tried to figure out what is the difference between people that are really inspiring and magnetic. I'm drawn to them. I want to be like them. And those I just say, they live in a small life. I don't want that. And I noticed one of the main factors were the questions that they asked of themselves and others. And I began to say, if I want to be like this first group of being inspiring and encouraging others and lifting others up, having fascinating conversations in lives, I need to learn to ask good questions like this group over here. And the other thing, and I'm a person of faith, I began to notice that Jesus asked a ton of questions.
Yes,
and I thought, wow, Jesus, this spiritual master teacher, if anybody had the right to just give all the answers, it was him. Yeah. But yet he asked over 300 questions that we read in the 4 Gospels in the New Testament. And I thought, nobody really showed that to me growing up. And so maybe I need to learn from the way in which Jesus asked good questions. So those are the 3 factors of kind of the backstory of writing it. Then it became the topic of my dissertation for my doctoral work. And people said, I want to read your dissertation. And I said, no, you don't. I wrote it and I don't even want to read it. It's just too academic. So I tried to take the research that was applicable for the everyday person, me included, and say, how can I write a book that actually applies to the average human? And so bringing the cookies to the accessible shelf became the catalyst for this book.
Well, I'm a cookies on the bottom shelf kind of guy, so that's perfect on that. I love the context. And ironically, JR, at least in my research, that I've found that the people assume they ask far more questions when they do in the first 5 minutes. And they're usually either just a routine question like, how are you? How are things? Or it's a reactive question, which is, well, how about you on that? So why do people struggle so much? And what are some obstacles of why people don't ask questions, especially in those important, critical first 5 minutes?
Yeah, there are many obstacles, and a few of them that come to mind. First of all, we live in an attention-seeking age. I mean, some people have called this conversational narcissism, where the arrows are pointing in. Look at me. I walk in the room, here I am. There's very few people that walk in a room and have their arrows pointing outward and say, look at you, there you are. And so, as the joke goes, enough about me, what do you think about me? And so because we live in this narcissistic age, it's really hard because questions point the arrows away from us and toward other people. The other thing, it's not modeled very well. And because, just like I want to learn to be a better dad or to swing a baseball bat or a good golf swing, I've got to have that modeled well. And because it's not modeled well, it's hard to know how to do it well. But I think the other one, in addition to poor modeling, it's viewed as being inefficient. And for people, especially in business or sales, we get a lot of type A strivers and people that get things done. I'm a type A. I like to accomplish things, check things off the box. Well, questions can be perceived as being inefficient. How many times have we been in a meeting, we're about wrapping up, we're grabbing our computer and our notebook and about to leave, and someone says, any questions? And someone raises their hand and go, come on, man. Like
that guy.
You're slowing us down here. And yet there are times we need to just keep moving, but there are also times to slow down, and it feels inefficient. But it's inefficient in the short term, but it's wildly effective in the long term if we ask the right questions. So there's several, but those are a few.
Say that last line again.
Yeah, questions can feel inefficient in the short term, but wildly effective over the long term. And if we can have a long-term mindset, it will help us learn to ask better questions in the moment.
Well, and think about somebody in the sales, they're building relationship and the ability to ask those questions. And that's a phrase that you mentioned earlier that we say all the time is look at you, not look at me. Be interested, not interesting. How within the obstacles, let's move over to, that could be for the service world, for the sales world. Somebody in hospitality, all of a sudden you're coming up to me, let's say it's at a hotel or restaurant or whatever. What are some of the obstacles potential that somebody would not want to ask questions given that context?
Yeah. So I think we assume that people don't want to be asked questions. And I think in hospitality, I'm just going to leave them alone, right? They're tired. They're coming in late, and they might be, and we need to read the room. But remember, there's an epidemic of loneliness right now. And there are a lot of people that are asked generic junk questions. How are you? How's it going? But if we can ask really thoughtful questions and we can see it as a gift. In fact, I think one of the greatest forms of hospitality in our culture today is to ask someone a very thoughtful question and to give them the patience and the attention to answer, that we actually listen to them. For example, there's a great book, Unreasonable Hospitality, Will Guidara, amazing book. And so what is hospitality about? It's about connection. And sometimes we overemphasize that questions are just about information. That's certainly part of it, but it's also about engagement and connection. We know in leadership or in sales, in business, hospitality, that trust is the engine by which the vehicle runs on. So we can have a beautiful looking vehicle, but if the tank is empty of trust, we ain't going anywhere. And so how do we put trust in the tank? One of the ways we do that is to ask really thoughtful questions of other people. And sometimes there's so much trust I have with people. I'll say, I don't care what you charge me. I trust you. Just send me the bill. Why is that? Because I've earned enough trust with them over a period of time. And I think hospitality is a wonderful way that we can just take and I'm not saying ask 50 questions of someone. That could be overwhelming and actually make them exhausted and make it awkward. But can I go the extra 5 or 10 or 15% of intentionality to be able to ask them a thoughtful question that they say, no one's ever asked me that before. Thanks for asking. Well, and then they finish. I think these are gifts. And I don't think we often see questions as gifts because we only see it as transactional currency when really it's relational currency. And so if we can see them as gifts, we give people gifts. That's an amazing form of hospitality we give to others.
Well, I love the framing of that, and that it is a gift, and it is not annoyance of that. In the book, you reference a book that I'd read, which I'd loved where you unpacked that, How to Know a Person by David Briggs, and you referenced a key point, which actually you brought more to light, which is a diminisher versus an illuminator. So unpack that for us, especially in the context of asking questions.
Yeah, I'm a big David Briggs fan. In fact, I think he asks great questions in his writing and in his speaking a great deal. So I was very excited to get the book and actually wanted to interview him for the book, was unable to get a hold of him or get a response back because I think he is so good at that. But he talked about that. He said there are two types of people in the world. In every crowd, there are diminishers and there are illuminators. Diminishers are those people that make them feel really small, invisible, unvalued. They kind of use people rather than engage with people. They see them not to be befriended, but to be utilized. And so they often stereotype and ignore. But on the other side of the crowd, you will see illuminators. These are the people that they're just curious about other people. They have been trained or trained themselves to learn to ask great questions and to understand other people. And they just water the flowers of these people to see them bloom even more. And they just, there's a brightness to them. There's a magnetic side to them. And if you know about that framework now, Brian, if you walk in a room and you kind of say, who in this room are diminishers and who are illuminators, it's amazing what comes to light. I mentioned earlier the difference between, those that had inspiring stories and those that lived small stories. One were illuminators, one were diminishers. And I want to be an illuminator, which means I want to hang out with illuminators, which means I've got to learn to ask better questions. And so that idea of when I give people the gift of hospitality, of asking a good question, I'm illuminating them. I may be illuminating their thinking in a new creative way, illuminating them by adding value to who they are as humans. I may be illuminating the conversation and adding value to the business meeting that I'm a part of. But can I walk in and ask myself the question, how can I illuminate other people in this room? And just by that simple framework and question, it's amazing how our mindset can shift.
Well, you had a challenge in there with 4 words. I want to be. And you have a choice of being an illuminator or by default being a diminisher on that. So I just want to make sure we capture the gold on that is that it's a choice. It's
Yeah.
easy to go on default and be a diminisher. Look at me, not look at you. It's a lot more of a challenge to be the illuminator that's focusing on the other person.
Yeah. And Brian, I'm so glad you brought that up because and I do leadership coaching and consulting. And so when I'm with a leader, or if I'm just, it could be a barista at a coffee shop, or someone this morning, I swim at the YMCA in the mornings, and just seeing an employee there, is to always ask myself this question: how can I add value to the person in front of me? And value could mean smiling and not saying anything. It could be asking a question. It could be telling them a joke, complimenting them, giving them an important piece of information, just listening to them talk if they're having a bad day. But if we as leaders, if we as business people, if we in the hospitality industry, if we can say, how can I add value to the person in front of me? We do that. That is compound interest over time, not just with money, compound interest with time, relationships, trust. It's amazing what can happen if we just say, how do I add value to the person in front of me?
It's a great question. And it's others focused. So we really need to work at it. I want to be an illuminator. Some of the gold that I found in your book, you had these different levels, the 4 essentials of asking better questions. And I think it's going to be very revealing as you work through those 4 of where we kind of stop, where we aspire to be, but where we think we are, maybe 2 completely different things. So let's unpack those 4 essentials.
Sure. Well, in my dissertation research, one of the things that I found was that every good question, people say, what's the difference between a good question and a bad question, or between a great one and a good one? There are 4 things. You have to have wisdom, curiosity, humility, and courage. I don't know how you ask a good question without those 4.
Repeat those 4.
Yeah, wisdom, curiosity, humility, and courage. All 4 of those are essential. Wisdom, I could ask 10,000 different questions. I need the wisdom to know what's the right question to ask at the right time, for the right reason, to the right person. I also need curiosity. I don't know how you ask a genuine question without being curious. I need humility because I'm basically admitting, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
If I'm going to ask a question, I don't know. I'm not going to fake it. I'm going to ask it. And lastly, if we're going to put ourselves out there and say we don't know, that's going to take some courage, because sometimes people will say, really? You don't know that? And so to put ourselves out there requires vulnerability. Now, with that being said, wisdom, courage, curiosity, and humility, one of the other things I found in my research is there are 4 levels of questions. I think we know in our bones that not all questions are created equal, but I'm not sure we had a framework to know why are some more valued than others. And so one of the things I noticed is there are what I call different levels of questions, and those 4 levels indicate basically the level of relationship or trust that I have, whether it's a business relationship, a romantic relationship, a friendship, whatever it might be. And so level 1 questions are questions for information, just simple facts. They're transactional, they're straightforward with clear answers. It's very low risk. Yeah, they're very safe. And we need those in our culture. So you could walk up to a stranger, Brian, and ask this question, and it wouldn't be awkward. What's your name? What time is it? What time does the show begin? No one's going to be like, whoa, you're a creep. What are you talking about? It's a very easy, safe entry-level question. Low bar. When there's enough trust developed there, and that could be over weeks or in just a few seconds or minutes, I can actually begin to ask level 2 questions. And that's where I go a little bit deeper. Level 2 questions are questions for interaction. This is where we talk about thoughts and emotions. We're sharing a little bit more of ourselves. So a little bit of relational context or trust is required there. So, for example, it could be, how are you feeling about today's meeting? Or I noticed our numbers are down this quarter. How does that make you feel? So I'm asking them to give a little bit beyond just pure facts. Yeah. And so often the realm of small talk in level 1, which is great, this is where it takes it just a little bit deeper. It requires revealing something of me. If we're really close to someone, we can move to level 3. And level 3 is where this is questions for understanding, where it will require feelings and desires on our part. So there has to be mutual trust and vulnerability. So this might be a close friend, maybe some coworkers you know really well. And this is where you begin to share your hopes or dreams or disappointments. So you might begin to ask things like, what do you really want out of your role here at this job? Or what are some of your deepest fears as you enter into this new quarter? Or as we face these challenges, what are you afraid of? And so it's the heart of meaningful relationships. I think if we can look at our close friends and really healthy relationships over a period of time, a lot of them will be in the level 3. Level 4, though, Brian, is that the deepest level where we're plumbing the depths of human experience, and only a few people do we feel comfortable with receiving a question or asking a question at this level because it requires vulnerability and intimacy. So this might be a spouse, a best friend for 30 years, a therapist, a pastor, somebody you really, really trust, where you're sharing some deep stuff of you, and do you trust them immensely? And I think one of the things that's important is to realize, you ever been in a conversation where someone asked a question and you went, whoa, I'm not ready to go there. I mean, I don't know you that well. It's what happened is they jumped to a level that we had not established trust yet. And it felt weird and creepy or a little awkward. Too soon. The other side, Brian, is sometimes we have relationships where I've said, I've known this person for 30 years and all we talk about is the weather and sports and how big the fish was that I caught last week. Yeah. What we realize is we've been hanging out in level 1, maybe level 2. Long. And maybe it's time to bring it down. So we need courage and wisdom there to say, is this the time to take a risk to go to the next level?
And I like the correlation between the essentials, just as you had mentioned, the courage and the humility, to get to these different levels. So let's double click on this a little bit.
Sure.
Obviously, when somebody's meeting somebody for the first time in the first 5 minutes, which is most of our context, whether it's in hospitality or whether it's service professionals, whether it's sales, is it easy to just maybe stay too long in those safe level 1 when there's an opportunity, when you feel a connection? I mean, we chatted like girls just for a couple of minutes before this, and I felt like I could ask you a level 2 question. You could ask me a level 2 question, back and forth with there. So can you unpack that just a little bit as far as kind of how we navigate those?
Sure. And I know you work with leaders and those in the field, different various fields, on the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
If we started with a level 2 or a level 3, we might catch people off guard real quick and make it awkward from the start. And we want to avoid that, right? So we wouldn't ask things like, do you love your job or do you hate it? It's like, whoa, what's your name again?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So we want to avoid that. But if we only linger at the level 1, we can begin to ask vanilla or predictable questions.
Yeah,
and
good word, predictable.
Brian, one of the things that I've found, there's a universal rule, principle when it comes to asking questions. If I ask generic, thoughtless questions, I will most often get generic, thoughtless answers. However,
imagine that, right?
Yeah, but if I ask a thoughtful, engaging, caring question, I will often get a thoughtful, engaging, caring answer. It's as predictable as a communist election. It's amazing how that works. And so we may need to start with, how are you doing? Where do you work? Where do you live? Those are fine. But if we can read the room that, hey, there's been trust established in the first 30 seconds, then it's time to say, oh, how long have you been with the company? Sometimes people say, oh, I've been there 11 years. I asked a gentleman last night at a concert, how long have you been with the company you're with? 11 years. And I just asked, does it feel like 11 years?
Good follow-up.
Now, it's a simple question, and he could take that however he wants of, wow, it's felt longer. It's been a rough road. Or, no, it's flown by. Well, that's a little bit more of a thoughtful question. And he even said, I hadn't really thought about that, how I felt after 11 years. So I'm just trying to give him a gift to help him think a little bit more. And then when he responds, to say, oh, thanks for sharing, or nodding my head, of kind of giving that feedback back to him. We're developing trust through a lot of nonverbals in those first 60 seconds as well.
I love that. And let me give you an example that I've been trying to do with leadership dinners, for example. It's easy. We had one time where it was 8 people. So there was a lot that was there. It was just kind of easy to kind of get siloed. And I call it the small talk triangle. You get stuck in one of those corners and you can't get out. And so I started trying something that I call first, worst, favorite, I didn't know. So it's asking a question about their first, could be whatever. And I give them the option, JR, of either you pick or we pick.
Yeah, that's excellent.
And it's fun. And then they get to the worst, and it's very revealing. And it was amazing how after about 30 seconds, once people started answering with a little bit of authenticity as opposed to just kind of just something goofy, the depth that was there. And the didn't know question was, what's something about you that we wouldn't know unless you told us? And some people go, man, I've been working with you for 10 years and I had no idea that you had this experience or whatever with there. So I see the value in that, JR. And I've learned too that people will lead you. So as mentioned, you ask a generic question, you get a generic response. If you're willing to take that step, I've never had somebody go, oh, that's too personal, I'm not going to answer that. Usually their answers surprise me. They've actually gone more personal than I would have thought they would have, because they're rarely asked those type of questions. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, Brian, I love that you do that. And because what you've done is you've added just about 10 or 15% more intentionality.
Yeah.
And you gave some people some frameworks and some rails to run on. And those guardrails can be helpful at the beginning, especially when you don't know each other and we don't have a lot of context. And I love that you gave people agency to say, you can pick. Either I can pick or you can pick. Because if you had said, I want all of you to go around and tell us about your worst day on the job, and all of a sudden I'm going, who are these people? Why am I sharing this? Yeah. But if they want to, they can. And it's because they feel a sense of trust. And if they feel trust, people will go there. And so I love that. In fact, I might steal that. That's a fantastic thing, Brian. I've encouraged business leaders to say, if you struggle with that, think of 3 or 4 questions that you can have and put it on the table. Just put a little placard or, print out some sheets on the table and just say, pick one on here, and we'll allow everybody to share for 90 seconds around the table. So there's just little intentionality that is required ahead of time rather than how many business dinners have we sat through, right? And so you want them to walk away and go, you know what? That was a really engaging, interesting, I really like that guy. Man, she asked great questions. Wow, those two, I would love to do that dinner again when I'm back in the area, calling through and seeing my accounts. So that's I think where we can give people a real gift and build that trust for further conversations, whether it's business, hospitality, whatever it might be.
Well, and the irony, JR, is they enjoyed the conversation so much, but we usually try to talk more.
Yeah.
And how did they enjoy the conversation more? Because of asking questions.
Yeah, yeah. And the truth is, people like to talk about themselves. And so if we can have enough courage and discipline to keep our mouths shut and to keep the focus on them. In fact, there's a lot of connection between listening and asking questions because, there's that scene in Buddy the Elf. My family loves that movie every Christmas where he's walking with his brother through Central Park and he's just rattling off real fast about 12 questions in a row and he's not listening for the answer. And so I think I've been around people who are great question askers, but not great listeners.
Imagine
and they're like Buddy the Elf, where they just fire off 1,000 questions and they're like, can you give me some space to answer those?
Yeah.
Because those are all good, but slow down. But people on the other side, I've been with people who are great listeners, but not great question askers. It gets kind of awkward. We finish your thought and we just kind of stare and nod at each other that we need to play some conversational pickleball, right? I hit the ball to you, you hit it over the net to me. And we play back and forth. That's where pickleball's fun. If I'm only playing against somebody that can't return it, that's no fun. And so we want to be able to engage in this back and forth. The Chinese symbol for listening, I find that's interesting, is it has the symbol for ears, for eyes, and heart all together, which I find fascinating. And I'm not an expert on Chinese symbols, but that's always stuck out to me. Yeah. That listening does require the ear, the eyes, and the heart, and a little bit of the mouth by asking some questions. But there was a researcher named Charles Derber. I think he may still be alive. He was a sociologist at Boston College in the 70s. But he launched the Attention Interaction Project. And one of the things he did was he identified 2 conversational responses. One he called shift responses, and one he called support responses. The shift response is where someone would ask a question and the person who asked the question would listen to the answer, but shift the attention away from that person and back onto themselves. So it's like they put the spotlight on them and turned it back on them. So for example, if they said, so what are you doing this weekend? It's like, oh, I'm going to my lake house. We're going to do some water skiing. Then I would respond, oh, I don't really like water skiing. We're more like mountain people or beach people. Well, I just took the attention off of them and placed it on myself. My dad calls this stealing the ball from a teammate who's dribbling.
Great example.
We don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. But he said there's another group of people, and those are support response people. Instead of being competitive in the interaction, they're cooperative. So they might say something like, so what are you doing this weekend? Oh, we're going to our lake house. Oh, that's great. I didn't know you had a lake house. How many years have you had it? Or what do you love the most about your lake house? Oh, we're going to water ski. Oh, that's great. When did you first start water skiing? What do you love about water skiing? I'm keeping
you keep drilling
the support
down
on them.
Yeah.
The spotlight is on them. The arrows are on them, not pointing on me. And if you notice it, it's kind of like the FedEx arrow. Like once you see it, you can't unsee it. Or once you hear it, you can't unhear it. You'll notice shift response and support response around you. And the illuminators, Brian, they're support response people. And the diminishers are almost always shift response people. And
Good
so be thinking, where is the spotlight being put here? And I think about, there's a story of Winston Churchill's mother, and she got to dine with a political politician, Benjamin Disraeli, long ago. And then on a separate occasion was able to be with the Disraeli's rival, William Gladstone. And she wrote in her diary later, she said, when I left the dining room after sitting next to Gladstone, I thought he was the cleverest man in England. And then she said this, but when I sat next to Disraeli, I left feeling I was the cleverest woman in England.
Love that shift.
Yeah, the shift response, support response of the best leaders and the best people I know. When they leave the room, people don't say, wow, they're a brilliant leader. They're amazing. They walk away thinking, I have value.
Yeah.
I'm special. And that's the difference between diminisher and illuminator.
I call them boomerang questions.
Yeah.
Where I'm throwing it to you, but I don't care if you catch it. In fact, I don't want you to catch it because I want to get back so I can answer the question. There's a book, Every Conversation Counts, by an author named Riaz McGee. Have you seen that book?
I've not seen that book.
He's got a cool line in about listening. He says most people, they're loading, they're not listening.
That's a good
They're loading
line.
their next response. They think they're listening, but they're listening with the wrong motive. They're listening to just load what they're going to say next of that.
Yes,
so
that's good.
Love the gold
like
on the
that.
support.
Yeah, well, and even when you talk about, the boomerang asking, there's actually a term for it called boomer asking. And it's not boomers asking questions. It's,
I know exactly.
Right? And you realize it's so demeaning, isn't it? When someone asks you a question and you open your mouth thinking, wow, what a great question, only to realize they start talking and you realize, oh, they just wanted an opportunity to share with me what was on their mind.
Yeah.
And they don't really care what I think. And that can be really demeaning.
And it's one of those two, what we teach called me too, but back to you. So oftentimes we have the right motive.
Yes.
Oh, me too, JR. I had that same experience. And then all of a sudden I start telling my story and you're like, wasn't that my story? Didn't you ask me the question? And now you're answering the question of that, as opposed to like in the news, back to you.
Yes.
We give that moment to be able to go, me too, so that I can relate to that.
Right, relatability, connection. Yes,
exactly.
That's very good. Yeah.
And I give you the opportunity. You may go, oh no, I'm done. What's your experience?
Yeah.
Or you may say thank you, and then usually good conversations still do what? They'll remember that a moment or two later. Hey Brian, what was your experience?
Sure.
And come back to there. That's where you could tell there's some really good conversationalists. Yeah, I love in the book. You have a section called "How to Become a Questionable Influence." Play on words, questionable influence. Mm-hmm. We've got a number of leaders that are listening to this podcast, speak on leadership. How do you encourage / challenge them to use questions in their position of authority where where all of a sudden it's a gotcha, I'm breathing down in your throat here. Let's unpack that a little bit.
Sure. I was the late organizational leadership guru, Peter Drucker, who said, the leader of the past may have been the one who knew how to tell, but the leader of the future will be the one who knows how to ask. Now, what's interesting, he said that a few decades ago, and I think it's even more true now than when he first said it. There's a woman, a researcher by the name of Jennifer Garvey Berger, and one of the things she did is she interviewed leaders, and she found two distinguishing characteristics of the difference between good leaders and great ones. And what she found is that great leaders do two things: amplification and curiosity. Those are the two things in her research she found over thousands of people, leaders she interviewed. Amplification, as in, I'm going to amplify you. There's the illuminator idea again, but also a curiosity. And what the curiosity did was spur deeper trust, deeper creativity, and also a safe environment to speak up, even if it's a dissenting voice.
Okay, let's drill down on that, because that's critical when you're dealing with the power struggle of boss versus employee in this example.
Yes, very, very much so. And it's really hard when you're the employee trying to lead up to your boss, right?
Yeah.
And so oftentimes, again, we need wisdom to know, is this the right time? Am I willing to die on this hill? How important is this? Tone is incredibly important as well. And oftentimes I like to ask questions like, that's interesting. Have we also considered ... Or do you mind if I share another idea that I've been thinking about?
Yeah,
right?
asking.
There's still trust. There's respect that's there. And so, there's all sorts of research on the brain and what happens. When you give information, your brain lights up a little bit. But when you ask someone a question, one of the things they found is your brain lights up like fireworks are exploding in your head on the MRI images. And so it forces people to participate, to think in new ways. And so I'm always a fan of leading through questions. It doesn't mean we don't know the answers, by the way. And we could even use it very brilliantly as rhetorical questions. Mm-hmm. Like, have we ever considered ... Or it could be, we all know that blank, right? And I'm going, do I? Yeah, right. My brain just lit up in new ways. So we can lead people by helping pull them in with participation. But it just adds great value to them if we can ask beyond, how are you? What are the numbers this week? What's new? What's going on? But to simply say, hey, if we thought about this business model in a totally different way, how might we do it?
Yeah.
If we just got an inflush of cash of $300,000, what would be the best way we could utilize that for the strategy of our business? Or if 20% of our business went away tomorrow, what would we feel? What would we do? So, those sorts of things are ways to lead because it's inviting cooperation. It's pulling the best out of our people. And again, it's the African proverb. If I want to go fast, go by yourself, go by myself. If I want to go far, go with others.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
I think if we can be cooperative, then we can go farther. But is it short-term numbers, or is it long-term numbers and impact and influence that we can have beyond just the bottom line or the ROI?
So let's turn a corner. Let's assume that we've had a convincing case here so far on to ask better questions, or in general, maybe just start asking questions to go from there. Because the average person in the first 5 minutes in my research asks one question. One. And I'm not going to even count that's the how are you, what about you, though that beyond that question of that. So if we're wanting to grow in those areas of asking better questions, you have a whole section in the book of that. Let's unpack that a little bit for those that are at that spot going, all right, man, I'm there. What's my next steps?
Yeah, great. And I get this question a lot of people saying, okay, I'm convinced of asking good questions. How do I grow in it? And I devote the last third of the book to just being ridiculously practical of things you can do before, during, and even after how you can improve your questions. But I think initially, I would just encourage people, number one, you've got to cultivate curiosity. It's hard to ask good questions if I just don't care or I just don't think questions are important. You can kind of fake it for a little while, but people's BS meters are pretty sharp.
Big time.
And so we've got to cultivate curiosity and say, I wonder if, or imagine if we tried, or, I've been thinking about, and if we can just cultivate some of that curiosity, that's number one. Number two, when we hear a good question, write it down. Type it in the notes section of your phone. Put it in a Google Doc.
This seems obvious, but why? Why, JR?
Yes, because oftentimes people feel the pressure. I've got to come up with all these brilliant questions on my own. Yeah. I love asking questions. People say I ask great questions, but they're not all my questions. I've gotten some of the best questions from billboards, from podcasts, from overhearing someone in line at Starbucks, in a meeting. I go, woo. And I think, I'll remember. No, you won't. And so as the Chinese proverb says, the dullest of pencils is sharper than the sharpest of minds.
Yeah, love that quote.
Just write it down. Just write it down. And so write down a good question. Don't think you're going to remember it later. Voice memo it to yourself if you're in the car, whatever it is, but write it down and then have a place where you can store it. The other one I would say is asking good follow-up questions. I think sometimes the first question is good, but the follow-up is the juice. That's the meat. That's where you're really going to get the good stuff. Like, have you always felt that way? Oh, interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that. How did you come to that conclusion? Or what else? Tell me more. That can be a way of pulling things out of people.
I love the one you just said, 3 words, which is a statement question. Tell me more.
Yeah, right.
Or tell me more about that. How safe that
Yes.
it is to be able to say that. And it's a question posed in a statement.
Yes, absolutely. Or, what do you mean by that? I try to avoid that one, but the essence of that, what do you mean? Sometimes like, what do you mean? Like that can
exactly.
be.
Yeah.
So
But it goes back to your tone. Exactly.
Yeah, gotta watch your tone. But of like, yeah, tell me more, or like help me understand a little bit more. And again, that's a statement question as well. But I think if we can there's that, and then in a conversation, let's say you're having a meal with someone, to say, I'm going to be intentional enough to see if I can get them to be speaking for 60% of the time and me to speak for 40.
Love that.
And maybe even a higher percentage, maybe 70-30 or 80-20. But to ask yourself, what are the talking percentages of this conversation? Yeah. Ooh. And if I can catch myself saying, I'm talking a lot. I need to maybe say, what about you? Hey, let me take a few bites of my sandwich. And that's the big thing that people say, I want to ask good questions. I don't know what to ask. They ask me good questions, and I teach them the way question, W-A-Y. What about you?
You. I love that.
Just say that. I answer that. What about you? And if we can memorize that 3-word question, the way question, what about you? It's just so easy. Just play some conversational pickleball with me. What about you? How would you answer that? I want to hear from you. Yeah. And it becomes the way relationships and conversations grow.
And Jerry, you touched on something that we teach, which is called 2QM, 2-question minimum. And not in another direction, but I'm double clicking on that same folder that I'm in already. Yes. And it could be just as simple as, tell me more about that, or any of the questions that we had just brought up with there. But that's a mindset. It's got to be willing to go, I'm not checking the box because I asked the first question. If I'm really curious, to your point earlier, and I want to get more information from them, or find out more about what they think or their heart or their values, oftentimes I call it going from the additional question or additional answer on the first question to sometimes the exponential answer on that second or third question.
That's exactly right. And again, if trust is there, you may think you're asking a level 1 or level 2. They may take it to a level 2 or level 3 if they feel a sense of trust and openness there. And so it's just so rare, Brian, for people to feel like, wow, someone's genuinely listening to me. Yeah. Someone genuinely wants to know what I think. And that's the gift of questions that we can give to people, because better questions, better answers, better lives. I know I just sounded like Tony Robbins there. I'm not trying to give a Tony Robbins seminar.
Or better pizza, better ingredients.
So that's right. Papa John's, right? But it's so true. The better the questions, the better engagement, and the better life. I mean, just life is so much richer and more textured when we ask better questions.
I want to circle back real quick on something you said, because I think it's really, really important. It's the fact that we're paying attention to the percentage of how much we're talking versus how much we're listening. I like to call it the T2L ratio, talk to listen ratio.
Yeah.
And it's hard in the moment, but we can, if we're desiring to get better in this area. It's a really good growth step to your point of being willing to listen. Wow, am I talking too much? How much are they talking? Can I change that ratio, that it's more in their favor than in mine?
Yeah. There's one other practical thing, Brian, that I've just implemented just recently in the last 6 months or so. And that's, I do a lot of coaching via Zoom. And one of the things you can do, there's a lot of AI transcribers out there, but Zoom's got the AI transcriber. And so as soon as the call is done, I'll type into the Zoom AI function, please list all the questions I just asked in the last hour in this conversation. I will then cut it and paste it. I'll put it in a Word document, and I will then assess what grade would I give that question. Now, some people think, man, that's a little extreme and overboard. Maybe, but I'm always trying to push myself to be a better question asker. And so I've got to grill myself on my own questions. Ram Charan, one of the things that he did is he asked, or he in his research, he said it's important for us to ask incisive questions, not just informative questions. And he defined, in his research, he found that an incisive question is 15 words or less. And so what I will do is I will actually go through and count the number of words in those transcribed questions on Zoom and say, ooh, that was 22 words. I think I could still keep the essence of the question, but trim it down to 13, 14, 15 words. Right. And I'm trying to ask more incisive questions by shrinking the amount of words that it takes to ask the same thought. So that's how I'm trying to push myself. And with AI tools, it's easy to do to say, what questions did I ask? First of all, how many did I think I asked in the last hour? Then let me go through, I thought I asked 20. I only asked 7. Yeah. And so then we can just have a clear understanding of how many questions we're actually dealing with.
Perfect. Love it. So I'm going to drill you with some rapid fire questions.
Sure.
So first thing that comes to your mind, quick questions, quick answers. Okay. Talker or listener by nature?
Unfortunately, talker.
Okay. Names, really good or bad at remembering them or growing in that area?
I'm really good at remembering names, but I worked and continue to work very hard on that.
Good. Love hearing that. We talk a lot about nailing the names. So kudos to you on that one. More scripted or more spontaneous?
I'm definitely more scripted. I'm a planner. I like things. I like to know what my schedule is going in. I can drift off of the plan, but if I go in with no plan, I'm not at my best.
Yeah, that's good. I had one author I just recently read, and he mentioned he becomes prepared so he can improvise better.
Yes. I call it jazz music. I come in scripted with what I call a bass beat. And if I over-prepare, I think preparation is way more important than planning. So if I've over-prepared, I know the bass beat that we're going to follow in the jazz music. But if we want to riff and improvise, as long as we keep coming back to the bass beat, I'm fine. I'm not a classical music guy where every note on every line on every page has to be hit. But as long as we've got the bass beat, and if I'm prepared in that way, then I'm golden.
Well, I'm going to ask you the ultimate gimme question here of a lob pitch, which I ask everybody, but so I have to ask you. Questions come naturally, or do you have to be intentional to ask them?
Natural, but I'm always pushing myself to learn and get better.
Good. I would have been surprised if you gave me a different answer on that one. Eye contact, natural or something you have to think about?
Something I've got to think about, and I do think about it often. I wish it were more natural for me.
And biggest communication pet peeve?
Yeah.
What drives you crazy?
When people talk only about themselves and don't ask questions of other people, there's no conversational pickleball. It's just somebody talking and they're not even aware, or they are aware and don't care. That drives me crazy.
I like that. Aware and don't care. Or you just call, I call it sometimes, we're just commenting ourselves to death through this conversation.
Yeah.
You comment,
and the only person that cares in that is the person talking.
Exactly. Yeah, because at that point you're just trying to keep up or one up.
Yeah,
and usually they're not good on there. 3 words that describe a great conversation.
Hospitable, engaging, humble, which I think could lead to a 4th, which is interesting.
Well, you bought 3, get the last one for free on that one. What would you say is your superpower in a conversation? I think I know the answer to that one.
Questions. And I'm an encourager by nature, and I think that's my spiritual gift. And so I try to steward that well in a conversation. So questions, and if that's too easy of an answer, then encouraging people. I think we live in a world that catches people doing things wrong. I try to be a person that tries to catch people doing things right.
And back to what you said earlier, it's a support mindset. And also, 2, it's an illuminator mindset, not a diminisher.
Yeah.
How do you know when you're genuinely connecting with someone?
When there's trust, when someone gives me or I give them a full-bodied yes, where I just know their full attention is on me and it's so valuing. To me, when there's trust and I'm not worried, can I trust them? When there's trust, and that's often through the body language more than the words.
Yeah, it's true.
Their feet are angled toward me. Their shoulders are angled toward me. Their eyes are locked in with me. They're not scanning the room over my shoulder, over my head. That's when I feel like I'm in a great conversation.
That's great. Last question. If you could leave every person you meet with just one feeling, what is it?
Feeling valued, and also that they had value added to them in that conversation.
I like that. They walk away better because of the conversation. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah. As much as we ask questions and need to ask questions, and it's incredibly powerful to ask questions, there are also limitations. And even though some people can be so excited about this idea of asking better questions that that's all they do, and I would say there are 2 other things we need. There are times we just need to be quiet. That sometimes questions, and too many questions, can actually be detrimental. And so to not be afraid of silence, I think is important as we think about this, but also to realize there are times to give answers. In the Old Testament, the book of Ecclesiastes says there's a time for everything, right? And which means there's a time to ask questions, there's a time to be silent, and there's a time to say, it's time to speak. It's time to speak up for this, even if it's unpopular. I need to speak up and be courageous in this moment. And so I think that's where we need the wisdom piece, to say, is this the time to be silent, to ask good questions, or to actually make decisions, to actually speak up? So I think that's important. Just because we have the skill, we need to also make sure we have the wisdom to go with the skill.
Love it, JR. How can people find out more about you, your world, the book, the podcast?
Yeah. So I've got a podcast called the Resilient Leaders Podcast, 12 minutes or less every Tuesday morning. That's very intentional. Leaders' time is very limited. And so I listen to my podcast on 1.5 speed. So that means it's 10 minutes or less if you choose to listen to that each week. The book can be found anywhere good books are sold. And ivpress.com is the publisher's website, or on Amazon, of course. And I'll even say this, Brian, and I hope this comes out confident and not arrogant, but I'm so confident that people will benefit from this book that if your listeners purchase the book and honestly don't find that they were able to grow in their question asking, that it added value to them in their question asking, that I will personally refund their money. And I really believe in this message enough. But you can also find out more on my personal site, jrbriggs.com, or on our organization site, which is kairospartnerships.org, Kairos, kairospartnerships.org, where we do coaching, consulting, speaking, and writing.
Perfect. And I'll put all those links in the show notes as well for anybody to follow along. So, JR, this has been great. It's rare that I get a chance to interview somebody that I pursue. And it makes me look forward to it all the more. Not that I don't enjoy the other one, but even more so. And then something, too, that it's become a lot more of my passion, especially with the first 5 minutes framework here, is asking questions, let alone better questions than that. So thank you for your time and the gift of this today.
Well, thanks for reaching out, Brian. And Brian, you are very intentional, not just in those first 5 minutes, but it's very clear you're intentional. And no doubt people benefit, including me today, because of your intentionality. So thank you for that gift you've given to me, and I appreciate the time.
Thanks you. Loved that interview. And I'd like to thank our guest, Dr. J.R. Briggs, today. And I hope you will never think about asking questions the same as a result of this interview. In fact, I have a free cheat sheet resource with all the key points, questions, and quotes. It's absolutely free. This is the step that elite business connectors who want to not just listen, but apply what they're hearing and put it into action will actually do. Be that guy. Be that girl. You can find this resource along with all the links from JR in the show notes below. And if you're resonating with the content in this podcast and want to bring the first 5 minutes framework to your team, your conference, or your next company event, reach out to me. I would absolutely love to have that conversation. You can find me on LinkedIn or at brian@brianbuckleyspeaks.com. Remember, it's Brian with a Y. And as my Chicago Bears chant, good, better, best, never let it rest till your good gets better and your better gets best. Until next time, keep improving your communication, conversation, and connection skills every day. As my dad always used to say, thanks for coming, but most of all, thanks for leaving. I'm out. You got this now.